Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I have come with a new work, that is Nizam Ezekiel poem, Background Casually. Background Casually, published in 1965. Nizam Ezekiel, 1924-2004. Background Casually was first published in his poetry collection, the exact name 1965. Nizam Ezekiel was an Indian poet, playwright, and essayist known for pioneering modern Indian English poetry. The biography of Nizam Ezekiel is available in the biography of writers. You can check the playlist. Background Casually is a semi-autobiographical poem that reflects Ezekiel's personal journey, struggles with identity, and his relationship with India. Written in free verse, the poem captures the poet's Jewish heritage, colonial education, and his sense of alienation in Indian society. Despite being born and raised in India, Ezekiel often felt like an outsider due to his Bene Israel Jewish background. This poem is a candid self-exploration of his life, cultural identity, and his place in a rapidly changing India. Summary of the poem. Background Casually is divided into three sections, each covering different aspects of the poet's life: childhood, youth, and adulthood. The first section, childhood and early life. The poet describes being born into a Jewish family in British India, immediately highlighting his outsider status. He recalls his school days, where he was bullied and ridiculed for being different. There is a sense of cultural disconnection, as he did not fit into identity-dominant Hindu or Muslim communities. His family was not extremely religious, and he personally rejected blind faith in favor of rational thought. The section 2, that is struggles of youth and adulthood. As he grows older, he rebels against societal norms, becoming interested in poetry and philosophy rather than conventional success. He briefly leaves India, traveling to England, hoping to find a better sense of belonging. However, his experience abroad does not bring fulfillment, and he eventually returns to India, realizing that it is the only place where he truly belongs. The poem also touches on his disillusionment with the politics, society, and the intellectual elite, reinforcing his status as an outsider. The third section, acceptance and reflection. In the final section, Ezekiel accepts his complex identity, acknowledging that his differences have shaped him as a poet. He realizes that, despite feeling like a stranger, India is his home, and he must embrace it with all its contradictions. The poem ends on a note of mature acceptance, suggesting that rather than seeking absolute belonging, one must find peace within oneself. Through this journey, Ezekiel highlights a universal theme of self-discovery, identity, and acceptance. Characters in the poem. The poet, Nizam Ezekiel, or the speaker. The central figure of the poem, reflecting on his life, identity, struggles, and acceptance. He is portrayed as an intellectual outsider, never fully fitting into any community. His family and a community. His Jewish heritage shapes his identity, but it also makes him feel different from the majority of Indians. His family is depicted as non-religious, practical, and somewhat distant from mainstream Indian culture. Peers and his society. The poem mentions school bullies, societal expectations, and intellectual elites, all of whom contribute to his feeling of alienation. The poet struggles with the acceptance and rejection from different groups throughout his life. The poem does not focus on external action, but rather on the poet's inner struggles and philosophical reflections. Themes in the poem: identity and alienation. The poem explores Ezekiel's struggle as a Jewish Indian in a predominantly Hindu-Muslim society. He never feels a full sense of belonging, whether in India or abroad. Cultural and religious conflict. The poet rejects religious orthodoxy, choosing rationality over faith. His Western education contrasts with the Indian traditions, creating an internal cultural conflict. Search for belonging. Despite feeling like an outsider, the poet ultimately realizes that India is his true home. The poem suggests that belonging is not about being accepted by society, but about accepting oneself. Post-colonial identity. Ezekiel represents the post-colonial Indian intellectual caught between Western influences and Indian heritage. He critiques politics, social systems, and hypocrisy, showing his disillusionment with both India and the West. Self-acceptance and maturity. The poem moves from struggle to acceptance as Ezekiel embraces his unique identity as an Indian Jewish poet. Instead of seeking validation from others, he finds peace within himself. Setting of the poem. The poem spans multiple locations, including India, that is in Mumbai, England, and possibly other places where Ezekiel traveled. The contrast between India and the West highlights his cultural confusion and the struggle for identity. Despite traveling, he ultimately realizes that India, flawed as it may be, is the only place where he belongs. Criticism and analysis. Confessional and autobiographical style. Like many of Ezekiel's poems, Background Casually is deeply personal and introspective. It follows the tradition of confessional poetry, where the poet shares raw, honest emotions and a personal history. Free verse and a conversational tone. The poem is written in free verse, making it natural and flowing rather than rigid or structured. The conversational tone makes it relatable as if Ezekiel is having an intimate discussion with the reader. Subtle humor and irony. Despite its serious themes, the poem contains humor and irony, showing Ezekiel's ability to laugh at his own struggles. He presents his outsider status in a matter-of-fact way rather than in a deeply tragic tone. Post-colonial commentary. The poem reflects the conflicted identity of many Indians post-independence, who were educated in Western ways but rooted in Indian tradition. It critiques the colonial legacy, social structure, and cultural contradictions of modern India. Philosophical depth. The poem goes beyond a personal experience, touching on universal themes of self-acceptance, cultural identity, and existential questioning. Ezekiel's final realization that he must live in India and embrace it, despite its flaws, mirrors the idea of making peace with one's circumstances rather than escaping them. Now let's analyze the important lines from the poem. First one. I've become a part of it, to be observed by foreigners. The poet feels both a belonging and an estrangement reflecting his dual identity and a cultural alienation. The next line. The Indian landscape sears my eyes. The line expresses the poet's painful yet a profound emotional bond with his homeland, symbolizing conflicted belonging. Next line. My ancestors among the castes were aliens. Ezekiel highlights his Jewish roots and a historical exclusion within India's caste-bound society. The next line. My backward place is where I am. The poet accepts his humble origins with a mix of irony and pride, reconciling with his roots. The next line. The poet Rascal Clown was born. Ezekiel identifies or defines himself as a witty, self-aware poet who blends humor with a critique of self and society. The next line. I have made my commitments now. The poet declares his acceptance of identity and a purpose, marking a mature self-realization. The next line. The later dreams were all of words. His passion and purpose evolve into poetry, showing devotion to language as his true calling. The next line. I have no regrets. The poet attains peace and a fulfillment, embracing his past and identity without any remorse.